The night is still young here in California. It is 8 p.m. and the polls have just closed in the state. Stay with us as we bring you the latest election results all night long.
Students are gathering in USC Annenberg Hall as early results begin to trickle in. We have reporter teams at the watch parties for U.S. Senate candidates Adam Schiff and Katie Porter. We'll take you there live to see how the races are shaping up.
Welcome to a very special night on Annenberg TV News. It is Super Tuesday, and an exciting election is sweeping all across the country. Polls in all the states, including here in California, now closed. Good evening. I'm Michael Mellinger.
And I'm Liv Kelleher. We're following key races across the nation and here in LA. Tonight's results will likely solidify the presidential nomination for the two major political parties.
We'll be watching closely as votes are counted. I'm Gabriella Rudy, and I'll be following major races in states across the country.
And I'm Olivia Tyler. I'll be taking a look at hot-button issues here in the Golden State, including the Senate race, Proposition 1, and the ballot measure aimed at making LA streets safer.
There is so much at stake tonight. More than 1/3 of the total delegates available in both the Republican and Democratic presidential primaries will be awarded this evening.
Joe Biden has long been a shoe-in as a presidential Democratic candidate. In Vermont, Nikki Haley has secured her second win of the race, narrowly skimming past former President Donald Trump. There are 16 states casting their ballots tonight, including California, Colorado, Texas, and Massachusetts. We'll be checking in on the national races throughout the night, including the presidential race and key Senate races. California correspondent Olivia Tyler has been following the state races here at home.
Thank you, Liv. Here in California, there are some issues and races in the spotlight. One key race everyone is keeping their eye on is the Senate race. It's the late Senator Dianne Feinstein's seat. Locally, primary voters are deciding who will run for Los Angeles County District Attorney and the council member of LA District 14. Meanwhile, voters also decided on the fate of topics like mental health, homelessness, and mobility. The race to replace former Senator Feinstein, who was the longest-running California senator and worked until she died at 90, does not come at a small price. So far, the price tag is 2.5 times what the last 3 Senate races have spent combined. The candidates are Democratic Representatives Adam Schiff of Burbank, Katie Porter of Irvine, and Barbara Lee of Oakland, and Republican and former Los Angeles Dodgers first baseman Steve Garvey. The Democratic favorite for the seat is seasoned Adam Schiff, who has spent over 2 decades on Capitol Hill and led the charge for former President Donald Trump's first impeachment trial. Lee is the former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and has been known as an icon in the liberal movement for decades. Porter is known for turning the famously conservative Orange County blue and her first fierce questioning of tech CEOs in Capitol Hill hearings. But as it seems now, this still may not be enough to beat Republican Steve Garvey, who hasn't run a single TV ad. Schiff continues to run ads calling the Republican a leader in the conservative movement for California, and that this strategy may be to knock out household favorites Lee and Porter for an easier path to victory in a deeply blue state come November. A Republican hasn't won the California Senate race since 1988. You may notice that some candidates appear twice on your ballot, but the race will only fill 1 seat. How is that? Voters will be electing a U.S. Senator to serve the remainder of late Senator Dianne Feinstein's term, which is November 5th to January 3rd of next year, so for just about 3 months. Voters will also be voting for someone to fill the 6-year term beginning next January. This could be the same person or 2 different people.
And Olivia, I know kind of a unique situation here in California right now. In theory, we could elect 2 different U.S. senators tonight, one for a short period and one for the full 6-year term. Tell us about that.
You know, it's a very interesting thing for someone to see on their ballots. There's, you can vote for someone to fill in 3 months, and then you would vote for someone to fill in a 6-month term. It's not very likely that someone would vote for 2 people, considering most people have their fan favorite, but it is an option.
Important to note that that would be a very short tenure for that winner of the special election. More likely that we will have one person win both rates, but this is a top 2 primary, so we will see which 2 candidates will go through to the general election in November.
Yes, absolutely.
We have reporters Joey Elbaum and Rory Burke at the Schiff campaign's watch party in Hollywood. Joey and Rory, what can you tell us about the mood in the room as we await results?
Things are looking good at the Schiff campaign here at the Avalon in Hollywood. The Avalon nightclub, that is. But tonight, there's a different kind of party. Guests are filling in, are excited to support Adam Schiff. They're playing live music, including songs like Lean On, as Schiff looks to lean on his supporters for their votes.
Yeah, that's right. As Rory mentioned, this is typically a nightclub, so as you can imagine, the lights in here, the music in here, the atmosphere is ready for a party. And for the Schiff supporters, it might be a party tonight, as Adam Schiff has been a leading candidate up until this point. As mentioned earlier, there are two candidates that will move forward from this primary to the general election, and Schiff is looking to be one of those candidates to secure his spot moving into November. The energy is high here. Doors just opened for supporters. Adam Schiff is expected to be here and will be here all night checking in, so don't go anywhere and we'll check in with you soon. But until then, back to you in the studio.
Joey, Rory, we will check back in with you shortly. We know you'll be at the Schiff camp all night long, but now we'll take you down to Long Beach and the Katie Porter watch party.
Reporters Stephen Noble and Sarah Shorenstein are standing by. I know it's early in the night, but for those of you at home, what can you tell us about this watch party?
So we're here live in Long Beach at Katie Porter's watch party, and we're at the bungalow where it's this 60s sort of 70s vibe. There's music playing on the speakers, and it's ranged from everything from reggae to psychedelic rock to now a little bit more upbeat pop music. And supporters are just starting to funnel in, making their way out onto the patio where they can overlook the marina. And the excitement in the room is really starting to fill. Sarah, what can you tell me about Porter's position in this election here tonight?
Sure. So a little bit about who Katie Porter actually is. She's the other major Democrat in this race, along with Barbara Lee, as well as Adam Schiff, as mentioned before. She is famous for flipping the famously conservative California 47th district, at previously 45th district, from red to blue. She is Elizabeth Warren's protege, so she has a lot of pressure to really keep up the progressive end of the Democratic Party. And the one last thing that's very important about her position in this race is she's actually the youngest candidate at 50 years old. You want to tell us a little bit more about it, Stephen?
Yeah, so she's hoping to capture that younger audience, and just this weekend she went in her iconic minivan to the polls with her 18-year-old son. It was his first time ever voting, and they voted in this election. So we're excited to see what's going to happen here tonight. Michael, Liv, back to you in the studio.
Sarah, Stephen, thank you guys so much. We'll be back with you later on for what is happening at the Porter watch party as the night moves.
Now let's turn to Gabby Rudu, who's been keeping a close eye on early voting results across the nation.
Thanks, Liv. National races are heating up in states like Alabama, Virginia, Massachusetts, and Texas. Results have shown Trump to be an overwhelming favorite in Alabama and Texas. These two states, as well as Virginia and some others, are holding open primaries, which give all registered voters, regardless of party affiliation, the opportunity to vote in either Democratic or Republican primary races. Let's get a quick recap on the primaries that have already been held so far this election season. Nevada, Idaho, Iowa, South Carolina, Michigan, North Dakota, New Hampshire, and Mississippi have already assigned their delegates, and former President Trump is in the lead. Let's turn to tonight's races to see how they'll impact these numbers. In Alabama, the former president leads with 83.7%, with Haley trailing behind with 12.6%, Biden leading on the Democratic side with 89.3%, uncommitted following with 1.6%. Now, just last week, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that embryos created through in vitro fertilization are considered children, prompting national backlash. It'll be interesting to see how this ruling affects tonight's result in this state, which has 50 Republican delegates up for grabs. Turning now to Massachusetts, with 40 Republican delegates up for grabs. Former President Trump leading again in this state with 61%, Haley following with 35.9%, Biden leading on the Democratic side with 83.2%, uncommitted following with 1%. Now, Massachusetts was one of the states looking to ban former President Trump from appearing on the ballot. While the U.S. Supreme Court ruled just yesterday that states cannot invoke the constitutional provision to keep presidential candidates from appearing on ballots, this may have an effect on results in Massachusetts. Let's look at Virginia. where the former president is again leading with 63.1%, Haley following behind with 34.8%, Biden leading on the Democratic side with 88.7%, uncommitted following with 1.6%. Now, Virginia has 48 Republican delegates up for grabs tonight. Now turning to Texas, one of tonight's biggest electoral prizes with 161 Republican delegates. Once again, the former President Trump leads with 77.8%, Haley following behind with 17.2%, Biden leading on the Democratic end with 85.4%, uncommitted following with 2.1%. Now, immigration has emerged as a central issue for this year's election, prompting both President Biden and former President Trump to stage rival campaign events just last week on the banks of the Rio Grande River. These dueling trips are a strong indication not only that Biden and Trump are already looking beyond the primaries to a likely rematch of their 2020 campaign, but also that the issues of immigration and border security will continue to be dominant topics this election season. I'll be back later on tonight with updates on these states and more.
Gabby, thanks so much. And for many, though, the primary election can be quite confusing, and terms used by TV hosts and pundits often go over everyone's head. Reporter Vincent Demonte, though, breaking it down and explaining why today is so super.
What's so super about Super Tuesday?
That we're going to learn about who we are as a country and what direction we want our government to go based on the results of that day. It's the biggest nominating contest, the biggest primary day up until Election Day in November.
As of tonight, 15 states and American Samoa will have held primary elections. Registered voters for the Democratic and Republican parties are deciding who they want to represent them in all levels of government.
We're also going to find out more locally of the candidates running to replace Dianne Feinstein in the California Senate, who are the top two that are going to emerge. Then there's some big initiatives across the states.
Swing states like Massachusetts, Minnesota, and Virginia will be major tests for Republican Nikki Haley, who has offered herself as a Trump alternative. This will also be a critical night to see how many vote uncommitted to protest President Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war. Here in Los Angeles' new ballot processing facility are doing their best to ensure that Super Tuesday votes are counted safely and accurately.
Yeah, I think that the goal of the facility was to consolidate the ballot processing into one location. That allows us to address transparency and security in ways that have always been important.
After today's election, roughly half of the states will have conducted primaries. The rest will be held until June. Nominees will then be selected at each party's national convention over the summer. For Annenberg Media, I'm Vincent Demonte.
Now let's go to Tess Patton, who's been talking with people at the Annenberg Forum watch party here on campus. Tess, tell us, how is it going over there?
Thank you so much, Liv. It's going great. As you can see behind me, we have a pretty great crew here tonight. There are panelists and experts talking everything Super Tuesday about the national and local races here. And today, right now, we're joined with two people from the political union. We have Eleanor Love and Duncan Law. Thank you so much for joining us. So what brought you and your organization here to Annenberg tonight?
Yeah, well, our organization, the political union, I'm the vice president, Duncan's our director of communications. We meet every week to talk politics, policy, current events, and we came for Annenberg's coverage of the 2022 midterms, so we thought we'd show up again today.
Awesome. And what issues are you two most concerned about this election cycle?
I mean, there's a lot to be concerned about. I think as a registered Democrat, I'm most concerned with this primary about the response to Biden's policy in Gaza. I know there's a lot of protest voting happening. I personally voted uncommitted, and I think a lot of people are going to be doing that. So I'm most concerned about that. I mean, in terms of the election overall, come November, I'm worried about democracy, and I will be voting for Joe Biden because I'm worried that that Donald Trump is the antithesis of American democracy. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Duncan said, abortion and I suppose access to good health care is another issue that I'm very passionate about for this election season.
Speaking on those uncommitted votes, how do you think the uncommitted votes coming out of this primary election might affect Biden's policies moving forward as he finishes up this term?
I think it's a really good question. I mean, we'll see. I don't know how responsive he will be. I hope he's responsive. But I think more than anything, it's great to see people democratically voicing, in a way, a protest, voicing that they're not content with his policy. I hope he takes it seriously. I really do. But more than anything, I'm just proud of Americans for stepping up and doing that in a respectful and meaningful way.
Yeah, I think that Biden's campaign hasn't really fully turned on the gears yet, so it'll be really interesting to see how his campaign responds to voter turnout this primary election.
Well, thank you both so much. We're going to go back to the studio to hear more, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And breaking news, this just in. According to Associated Press, former President Donald Trump has won the state of California. Trump currently leading the state to 72.3% to Nikki Haley's 23.3%. Guys, what do we make of this?
Again, not shocking. Trump has been leading across the country in polls, but that margin is not that large. I mean, it's interesting to see how this is going to bode for Republicans in California in the general election, but not totally a shocking outcome.
I mean, we're only 15 minutes after polls close here. We're already calling it. I mean, it is Trump's night. It is Biden's night. They are winning the big hand of contests all across the country. Nikki Haley only picking up her second win of this primary season. It's going to be a long road ahead for her if she stays in this contest.
She has said that so long as there's a place for her, she has some influence, she'll stay in the race. The question is, will that influence really matter after Super Tuesday? Is there a reason for her to stay on? What do you guys think?
I mean, Nikki Haley has said that she's not dropping out anytime soon. I mean that has been her motto, that she is in this race. So we'll see where she goes, but it's definitely an uphill battle for her if she stays in beyond tonight.
Absolutely. Well, stay tuned. You don't want to miss an interview live with the former president and CEO of the Obama Foundation.
Stick with us for more updates on key races here in California and across the country. All of that and more after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Let me tell you how we amplify our Latina voices. Check out Dímelo. We have it all.
Deportes.
Entertainment. Noticias. ¿Qué tal? Soy Mariela Gómez y bienvenidos a Dímelo Ahora.
Radio and podcasting.
Comida y cultura. Digital social media.
¿A qué equipo le vas tú? LA Galaxy o LAFC? Dímelo is the only Latina-focused media outlet at USC. Dímelo, we have it all.
Dímelo, we have it all.
Mr. Owl, how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop?
Let's find out. 1, 2, 3.
How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? The world may never know.
There's a new pet.
Chia.
Chia Pet, the pottery that grows. It's fun and easy. Soak your chia, spread the seeds, keep it watered, and watch it grow. And now grow a whole collection of fun with chia teddy bears, puppies, kittens, rams, bulls. There's even a chia tree to keep your pets company. Chia Pets and Trees, the pottery that grows.
The Chia Pet and Chia Tree are available at Kmart, Rite Aid, Ames, and Woolworth. Makes a great gift.
Votes are continuing to trickle in. Welcome back to our Super Tuesday election coverage.
And joining us right now is David Seufert, the former chief executive of the Obama Foundation. David, thanks so much for joining us.
It's a real pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on Super Tuesday.
And for everybody at home, David Seufert was most recently the president of the Obama Foundation after serving as its CEO, previously serving in the White House in the Obama administration.
David, we're so happy to have you here. We are here at USC, a college campus where there are a lot of first-time Gen Z voters. People that I've spoken with have consistently remarked about Biden's age. They aren't confident that Biden is able to understand their values or concerns as voters, given that big age gap. What will it take for Biden to energize and win this demographic?
So it's a concern that's unique across age, across different demography, and the Biden campaign acknowledges and recognizes that that's a central hurdle that they need to jump over. I think what you'll see once the campaign is joined, which it will be, I think in earnest after today, is an acknowledgement of that reality, but then a quick pivot to the choice that people are going to face. And there's one thing I remember from my time in the White House when Joe Biden was a vice president. He had this saying that you will be hearing a lot, which is, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. And after the State of the Union address this week, the comparison is going to be the key.
And David, taking it back a couple years ago, when you were appointed to lead the White House Office of Political Strategy, Politico wrote in 2014 that there were, quote, years of feeling Obama isn't interested in getting anyone elected but himself. Do you see the former president getting more actively involved in boosting Biden down the stretch as we move closer to what looks like a Biden-Trump rematch?
I think there's been a consistent example since former President Obama left in 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and the specials in 23. Both he and the former First Lady have engaged. I think it's important for everybody to realize, however, that essentially it's Joe Biden and his campaign that calls the shots. And so that when they want to engage surrogates, it isn't just the former president deciding what they want to do. Essentially, the call comes from them, and I expect that call to be coming a lot.
And David, let's talk about the Democratic Party as a whole. I know in that role at the White House, you kind of worked as a liaison between the White House and the Democratic Party as a whole, kind of building policy. Democratic Party seems like it's moved a lot farther left since you left the White House. Where do you see the party at today, and where do you see the future of this party going?
So this is an important election to decide that, because what you see essentially is Joe Biden, who in 2020 won the nomination as the most moderate or pragmatic of the candidates who are on the stage, and he won it fairly convincingly. Now, where that goes after 2024 is an open question. But I think for the overwhelming majority of voters, certainly in the choice between Biden, Trump, and a third party, concepts of ideology, right and left, are going to be a secondary or tertiary idea. The question of the direction of the party is going to be determined essentially by what happens first in 26, but then an open seat for president in 28, because I think it's consistent for both parties, and former President Trump is a perfect example of this, that at least when they control the White House, the direction of a party is derivative of the agenda and the policy that the president, the top of the ticket, sets. And so unclear what we will see. But one thing I think is important to point out, especially for this station, when you think about your demographic and your students, there are two things that I think folks should hold in tension that both campaigns will think about. It is true that Gen Z is the most progressive generation, but it's also true that over 70% identify as either moderate or conservative. And so when you think about the voters who have eroded or are up for grabs in terms of 18 to 29-year-old cohort, essentially the central focus in terms of the up for grabs voters are not college students, but essentially the non-college students who represent close to 75% of that 18 to 29-year-old demographic. Those youth overwhelmingly identify as moderate and conservative. And so when you think about any cohort, any demography, any generation, you have to understand the fine variation that there is among even members of one cohort. So where that goes, open question.
You know, Nikki Haley has been polling strongly with independent voters. How does the Dems and how does Biden go about securing that vote and trying to bring those independent voters over to their side in the general election in November?
Yeah, they've been watching that vote very, very closely. And I think if she stays in, they'll continue to look at that. And what has it said? It said that among more suburban, even some urban voters, independents, that it's not a never Trump. It may even be a factor where there are some Trump 2020 voters who, frankly, after two rounds with the former president, just aren't willing to come. And so you can bet that in terms of the modeling, the focus, and the efforts that they're going to have in the battleground states, these Haley voters are going to be a central focus going in over the course of the next 7 months.
And David, thank you so much for being here. It's truly a pleasure. I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
And Hannah Abu-Haj is sitting by live in the newsroom again to speak with students about voting on campus here. Hannah, what is going on?
Tonight I am joined by Liv Bowler, Director of Media for Vote SC, and Sophia Perez, the Executive Director of USG's Political Student Assembly. Both have worked to make voting more accessible to USC students. Thank you guys for joining me here tonight. So my first question is actually going to go to Liv. For many college and USC students, voting can be quite a confusing process. So what does Vote SC do to help students navigate events like tonight's primary?
Yeah, first, thank you so much for having me. In terms of what Vote SC does to help college students navigate, it's sort of a unique process and a unique point in their lives is we do tabling pretty much once a week, once every couple weeks, that educates a lot of students about what's happening and like how to prepare for it. So we have a lot of out-of-state students, we have a lot of students that are from California, and from a lot of other places, but in terms of mitigating and making sure that a lot of people are aware of how specific voting measures and specific things relate to them has been sort of the forefront of what we do. Allowing people to check their voter registration status has been important because, you may think you're registered and then you realize, actually, maybe I didn't finish filling out that form. And I think it's really important just to make sure that you're ready before the time comes because not every state operates like California, so California you can do same-day registration. In places like my hometown of Kentucky, that's not possible. So if I hadn't registered to vote in time, I wouldn't be able to vote. And really important elections that mean a lot to me and mean a lot to our country.
Awesome, thank you. And Sophia, so you work with the USG PSA. Today you guys did an event with Vote SC where you helped get students registered. Can you talk about the process of setting that up and what it was like when students actually arrived to register to vote?
Yeah, so events like this, I wish I can say I can take all the credit, but it's truly the result of a lot of people hands-on work and volunteering their time to get students to vote. And a lot of times when students come, as exactly as Liv mentioned, they're not really sure how to go through with this very confusing process and seems daunting at times. And so us being there and being able to kind of guide and navigate them through the process is really beneficial, not only for us to be able to see how we can make voting more accessible for students and for the community at large as well, but also for them, they can be empowered and have a voice in the election.
Yeah, and with these upcoming elections leaning so heavily on the youth vote, what is USC doing to continue getting students registered and prepared to participate in civic engagement?
Yeah, I think the first, I'd like to say, we have done a lot throughout the year. Like, for instance, our National Voter Registration Drive is a huge event that we have early in September to get students registered to vote. But I think another big one is just accessibility. How can we make students informed and ready to vote? And I think one that USC has been really good at, whether it's Vote SC or Center for Political Future or the USC social media in general, is having a social media outreach. Students are always on their phones, including me, including all of us, and having that kind of information very accessible and easily accessible for students is a great way to get students informed.
That's awesome. And then Liv, with Vote SC and being involved in an organization like that on campus, what do you think is the importance of having these types of groups and spaces that promote a culture of voter awareness, especially on a college campus?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most important things about it is that we have, or not necessarily we, but people have underestimated how powerful the youth vote is and how powerful it can be if as many people who can be involved are involved. So being able to sort of pave the way to resources that motivate people to becoming a part of the process is detrimental in terms of changing the way that our society looks and the policies that we pass and the people that represent us. So getting more people involved, especially since the youth vote is made up of some of the most diverse people that the U.S. has ever seen, is incredibly crucial to our future going forward.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much. It sounds like you're doing great work to keep getting students ready to participate, especially with these upcoming elections. Now back to the studio for some updates on some other races.
Thanks again, Hannah. We turn our attention now to former President Donald Trump. Gabby Rudy, our national correspondent, sitting by the desk with us. What impact do you think the former president is going to have on this race?
Well, Michael, just yesterday, the Supreme Court handed a sweeping win to the former president by ruling that states cannot kick him off the ballot over his actions leading up to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. This bringing an end to a case with huge implications for this election season. Also, following a hearing last week, a judge will weigh moving the date of Trump's classified documents trial. But the judge in the hearing concluded the proceedings without making an immediate ruling or determination about when the trial will begin. Now, in terms of where the former president stands against opponent Nikki Haley, he continues to lead with 493 delegates as opposed to Haley's 52. Now, you guys, statistically, Nikki Haley, while falling very far behind Trump, as we've seen in a lot of these states, she is appealing to Republican women, young voters, and independent voters. So where do you guys see her vote those votes transferring to former President Trump or to President Biden?
Well, we do have breaking news. We just called Colorado for Trump. So another state that he takes, AP called it for Trump. Another state that he's taking over Haley. Haley did offer a alternative to Biden or Trump, and within those voters that voted for Haley, there likely are those never Trumpers who are not going to continue to vote for Trump. So Biden could pull some of those voters over to his side in the general election.
I mean, I think the vote for Haley is just a mixed bag. When I saw Haley speak last month here in Los Angeles, just a totally diverse crowd. We had a lot of older voters, a lot of younger voters, a lot of people that just didn't feel that they align with either party. I think going back to what David said in his interview with us, him talking about kind of that 18-year-old to 25-year-old, 35-year-old electorate, 75% of that is, kind of moderate. Where do they go? Where do they find a home in this political system?
Yeah, and you have those voters that just simply don't want to vote for another older white man who has been president before. And Haley was the only candidate that was not one of those options. So there is a likelihood that she could pull in some of that younger vote that did vote for her, could jump over to Biden. But it will, be interesting to watch in the general election and keeping an eye on the margins of, the rest of the states coming in on Super Tuesday.
But the former president's still very much front and center here through this primary season.
Definitely. Thanks, you guys. Let's turn to Annenberg media reporter Cam Kaufman, who's at the Trump watch party in Long Beach. What's going on there, Cam?
Hey there, Gabby. That's right. Yeah, we're here in Long Beach, and there were upwards of probably between 25 and 30 people here tonight, and we're at a grassroots organization kind of meeting place here. And so basically, it's a lot of people who are just regular, everyday folks here, and it's all self-funded. So it's a lot of people who really are passionate about the cause that we find spoken with tonight.
Now, Cam, can I ask you about what's going on behind you? I see there's some food on the plates on the table back there. There's some flags. What's this environment that you're in right now?
Yeah, totally. So they are having a potluck tonight. So there's tons of food out there. I think we're in the dessert room currently, but so little assortment back here. And then this whole room that I'm standing in right now is actually their merchandise room. So all of the merchandise that gets sold out of here, or like they take it out to events and things like that. But most of the money goes back into maintaining this building that we're in here in Long Beach. So it's, again, like I said, it's grassroots. It's very much self-funded. And so a lot of the money that they get off the merchandise just kind of goes right back into paying for the food that they had here tonight.
Gotcha. And Cam, the AP has just announced that Trump has taken Colorado. So what is the environment at that watch party right now after hearing that news?
Yeah, actually, I don't know if they quite know here yet. I haven't heard any cheering and stuff like that. And, the numbers are dwindling a little bit. The event was only over at 8. So, but I do know that earlier when Trump was celebrating the victory, they played something on the TV here, and I heard a lot of cheering. So, but I have not heard any cheering quite yet about Colorado. So maybe hasn't been quite announced yet on the TV. But I'm sure there will be some applause here.
Gotcha, Cam. Well, thank you so much for your time. Now, this high-stakes presidential election has increased significance for Democrats who are looking to hold power in the Senate. The 10 Senate seats most likely to flip include Nevada, Arizona, Montana, Texas, Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. The GOP needs to pick up only 1 or 2 seats, depending on which party wins the White House, to flip control of the Senate. West Virginia has long ranked as the seat most likely to flip. Now, you guys, which Senate races are looking the most important to you?
Well, I'm going to interrupt you there for a second. Senate races, talking specifically, we can call something now. The AP is telling us that Adam Schiff is the first candidate tonight to advance on in this Senate race. So talking about the Senate races, definitely that is one we're watching, especially here in California. Like we said earlier, it's going to be a special situation. We could end up with two different people, but what we know right now is the AP is calling it. Schiff is the first one to advance.
Yes, we'll have to keep an eye on that to see who the second candidate coming through will be, but a big night for Schiff, what they were hoping for. In terms of national Senate races, we're really looking at Texas. There is a hope that Dems flip Texas. There's always a hope that Dems will flip Texas. Whoever wins tonight will be the one to be racing against Ted Cruz. Of course, huge name in politics, something to keep an eye out for tonight. So certainly keeping an eye on Texas.
Exactly, especially since no Democrat has won a statewide office in Texas in 30 years. So this is definitely one to keep an eye on.
Right, and Beto O'Rourke was very well funded a few years ago, and he was a hope for the Dems to flip that seat, and it didn't happen. So unlikely, but we'll see. So now we're going to go over to Nicole Santos, who is at a polling station, earlier today. Nicole, tell us what you can see at this current polling station.
People came to cast their ballot in, not only ahead of the general election coming in November, but also for California Senate after the late Senator Feinstein. Let's hear what people have to say.
Well, everyone is concerned about the vote because, first of all, what I understand, economical crisis of United States at this moment. So we believe we need right candidates for run this country. So I believe everyone should come and cast their vote.
Me, I think they should help the mentally ill, like the homeless. And a lot of people are talking about the no bail thing. I think that's good because a lot of people cannot afford the bail. And half of the people that do afford the bail, they're rich people.
Stay tuned for the results coming out live tonight. This could clarify a little bit more who are going to be the preferred candidates for the presidential elections coming in November and who are going to be the top two candidates for California Senate. For Annenberg Media, I am Nicole Santos.
Our reporters are still live at the campaign watch parties for Representative Adam Schiff and Katie Porter.
Just like this. But don't block her. Don't block Schiff.
And we are here live at Katie Porter's election party. And tonight, the energy is still going. The music is going. People are outside eating hors d'oeuvres and mingling. And let's talk about where Katie Porter was today. She was over in San Diego meeting with one of the largest and oldest oil unions. And that was one of her big platforms coming into this election. She wanted to be a champion for the middle class, something that she's done in the House of Representatives, and tackle on corporate businesses. Now, she will be here tonight and will be introduced by her 12-year-old daughter, which is very interesting. Now, if Porter loses tonight, something to look out for in her speech is maybe who is she going to blame that loss on. Liv, earlier you mentioned how Adam Schiff was running ads that slammed Garvey's campaign, and she may talk about those ads as one of the reasons for why she may have lost. And she even came to X and posted on X calling those ads brazenly cynical and also called it political games. We'll see what happens tonight. We'll keep you updated live from Katie Porter's election party. Back to you.
Thanks, Stephen, for that update. We're going to go back to that Schiff watch party. We just heard from the AP that they called it for the first candidate going through to the runoff being Schiff. Has there been a change in the energy in the room? What is it like over there, Rory?
Oh, absolutely. Cheers are heard across the room as this has just become the Adam Schiff victory party. Everyone is decked out in Adam Schiff for Senate merch and posters and buttons that say "Riding with Adam" as pictures of him as a young kid. The energy has completely shifted. Everyone is celebrating, and we're all excited just to hear him speak and see what he has to say, and we're going to look out for him in the November election. Until then, we'll keep you updated throughout the night and let you know what Adam Schiff has to say. Back to you in the studio.
Attorney's race, it is incumbent George Gascon's battle against a full field. There are 11 other candidates vying for his job. Today's primary for the DA is the most crowded race in its history. Gascon was elected in 2020 after a summer of protest over police brutality. His progressive agenda helped him to the seat. He barred prosecutors from seeking the death penalty, ended the practice of trying juveniles as adults, and ended cash bail.
So, you know, we're keeping an eye on that DA race.
I mean, George Gascon increasingly pushing a more progressive agenda, not seeking a death penalty in the killing of that slain deputy last year. I mean, just very progressive for a lot of people here in LA. I mean, even from his own office, people are running against him, and I mean it's quite a lot. And it's a very crowded field. What does that say about him and the policy that he's been putting forward the past couple of years?
Yes, absolutely. Those running against him, 5 of whom currently work in his office, describe him as unfit for the job. His challengers have run campaigns against the incumbent rather than against one another. Normally, a primary winner has to win more than 50% to take the office. But with this crowded field, there will almost certainly be a runoff. The 11 other candidates' test is to find a way to stand out from one another while not pushing too far right in an increasingly progressive LA electorate. According to a U.S. Dornsife poll, support for Gascon is not high. In the county, dozens of cities have voted no confidence in him. He endured 2 failed recall attempts, and in early 2021, a Los Angeles Superior Court judge ruled that some of his initial policies violated California law. There is a perception all crime is up, but according to the LAPD, violent crimes are actually down. What has increased is the number of property crimes prosecuted by the city attorney's office. Still, Gascon's opponents are using this perception against him, many of them running on a tough-on-crime agenda. 2 former federal prosecutors are running against Gascon, one of them as an independent. His name is Nathan Hochman. He says he wants to remove politics from the DA's office. He claims that under Gascon's leadership, prosecutors have been stripped of their ability to file appropriate charges. So far, Hochman has raised the most of any candidate, including Gascon. The second highest fundraiser is the other former federal prosecutor, Jeff Chemerinsky, who has raised half of what Hochman has. Chemerinsky says his #1 priority is public safety. In the race for the 14th District City Council seat, there are 7 candidates running against the controversial incumbent Kevin De Leon. 2 years ago, De Leon was caught on tape making racist comments with 2 other council members. They resigned, he refused, and is running for re-election. Kevin De Leon is coming in tonight at 29.4%, whereas Miguel Santiago is at 22.85% and Isabel Jurado at 17.35%. There were months of protests demanding De Leon resign. Some of those protests were even outside his home. The LA Times released the secret recordings between Council President Nuri Martinez and member Gil Cedillo, along with De Leon. In the recordings, they compared their white colleague's adopted son to a monkey.
The president is glad to see that one of the participants in that conversation has resigned, but they all should. He believes that they all should resign. The language that was used and tolerated during that conversation was unacceptable, and it was appalling.
And look, Olivia, De Leon leading those early results we've got right there. What does that tell you about how LA is voting tonight?
You know, De Leon is leading. However, it would be a different story if an incumbent wasn't in the lead. You know, that's what usually happens. An incumbent sort of takes his spot over, especially in city council. But because of everything that has happened with this scandal, people are not happy. But, you know, he's the person they know to vote for.
Absolutely. I mean, that recording was very damning, but it seems to not entirely take him out of the race, coming in at 29% right now. We're still going to keep an eye on that race, but really a bad moment for California politicians.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with that many people in the race as well. It makes it hard.
And you know, we'll talk for a second about the other race you talked about, the DA's race. George Gascon, quite an embattled district attorney. He's got a lot of challengers who are running on a tough on crime platform. He's seen as this DA who's very liberal. As we start to get results tonight, what do you kind of expect from that race? Do you see one of those challengers kind of coming through?
You know, I think the challengers can definitely make headway, but I think that George Gascon will definitely still have the lead here, even though a lot of people are unhappy with the way that he has taken over the DA's office. Again, that's who they know. We saw someone earlier talk about the fact that no cash bail works for them, but it doesn't work for a lot of other people. And that is why, you know, 5 of the people that actually work under him in his office are taking a hard on crime approach. But we believe that he will still get enough votes to make it through and probably be in the runoff in November.
Well, very important ballot measure to keep an eye on. But another measure we're keeping a close eye on is the ballot measure overhauling the state's mental health and substance abuse treatment system. I spoke with the CEO of the Los Angeles Mission, who said the measure is a promising solution to help end homelessness, but it is complicated.
Treatment, not tents. That's the promise of Proposition 1. LA streets are full of tents. This is something Pastor Troy Vaughn sees up close through his work at the LA Mission.
The homeless population is a very diverse group of people in a community here in Skid Row, for example.
As a veteran and previously unhoused person, he understands the challenges. He supports Proposition 1, but he has some reservations.
It's hard to serve people that you just can't serve because you don't have the resources. It's taxing, and we need some kind of solution. And I do think that Prop 1 is leaning us toward that direction.
Prop 1 aims to target what many say is the root cause of this crisis: mental illness and addiction. The measure would overhaul the state's mental health care system in order to build more supportive housing, fund mental health and addiction services, and hire more mental health care workers. This proposition won't raise taxes. It reallocates $140 million of existing taxpayer money from the counties to the state. It also authorizes over $6 billion in bonds, $1 billion of which will be set aside for veterans.
California currently has the largest unhoused population in the country. Proposition 1 states that it provide about 11,000 behavioral health treatment beds and supportive housing units. However, with a homeless population of over 180,000 people lacking permanent shelter, many question the state's ability to make good on this promise and wonder if this is even enough, especially for the $6.3 billion price tag.
I work in Sacramento now. I see the inefficiency of the state managing all of these programs. I don't think it works. I'd rather have the same monies go to the county. That's really where my opposition lies.
We see that it's rich in services in terms of that, but you know, I'm not seeing, as I read it and understand it, that a lot of housing is going to come as a result of that.
Another point of contention is the proposition's inclusion of involuntary treatment. This type of forced care can seem extreme and aggressive. But Pastor Vaughn sees this type of treatment as not only humane, but necessary.
We cannot just walk by them and pass by them, and we have to put them in the right type of care and facilities with the intent of stabilizing them, not incarcerating them.
The measure has received bipartisan support leading up to the election, but ultimately voters will decide if they approve of this new approach to tackling homelessness.
Polling coming in on Prop 1 treatments not tents. Right now it has a 51% yes vote and a 49% no vote, with 23% of reporting already in.
And California Prop 1, as we saw right there on the ballot tonight, Hannah Abuhaj is outside with some guests who are ready to discuss what is at stake with this legislation. Hannah, talk to us. What's the like out there?
Yes, Michael, California residents have the opportunity to vote on Prop 1 tonight. This legislation gives $6.38 billion in bonds to build treatment facilities for those with mental health and substance abuse issues. The budget will also provide housing for those experiencing homelessness. Tonight, I'm joined by Kylee Akavan, Executive Director of the USC Center for the Political Future. I also have Sarah Schau-Steinecker, the President of the Trojan Democrats, here with me. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
So my first question is actually going to go to Kylee. Prop 1 has the ability to make significant impacts on accessibility to both mental health and substance abuse treatment facilities. So how would the passage of this legislation impact California residents?
Well, it depends on your perspective. So if it succeeds, this bill is going to put billions of dollars into funding acute treatment facilities for people who have severe mental illness. Some of those people will include veterans and people who are currently unhoused. So for that reason, it can benefit us from seeing people who have severe mental disabilities, get them off of the streets and into places where they can be taken care of. If you have a different point of view, you might think it's a disaster because it's going to increase California's debt at a time when we can't afford to do it, and that's part of why we're seeing this bill so close in the race right now.
And Sarah, you're here representing on behalf of the Trojan Democrats. We just spoke with some individuals about youth voting and that importance. So as a student here on campus, what has been the general consensus regarding Proposition 1? Has it been talked about? How are students feeling?
Yeah, so generally propositions and ballot measures don't get as much discussion time because students, frankly, are caring about the big ticket issues. They're caring about the presidency, they're caring about the Senate. But we do have some discussions about the issues that this ballot measure does affect. So we have discussions about the unhoused population and the struggles that they're facing in LA. We have talks about the state budget. So we talk about the issues that are surrounding this ballot measure, but we don't necessarily discuss this one particularly because it's just not something that a lot of students are really passionate about.
And so if Prop 1 gets passed, following these issues that students are considering and are very passionate about, what do you think the USC community can anticipate seeing with changes made in the area?
I think that when I was reading up on the bill, I think that the implementation of this ballot measure will help students see a more immediate impact of the money. Right now, the measure is funded from the millionaire's tax, and a lot of that money is underutilized because there's so much red tape. And part of this ballot measure will help to cut down on that red tape and let the money be utilized at the county level. And so I think that students can see a lot more treatment facilities being built, staff being trained. There's also a huge emphasis on building up staff training programs from the pre-medical level. So students at USC may be receiving some extra education from that to build that compassionate community-based care that is really imperative to treating the holistic problem. So I think that we can see changes at all levels, and I think that if the ballot measure is voted in, you'll see some more immediate change because of that cut in red tape.
And Kami, my final question is going to go to you. Very similarly, but going a little bit more broadly, what do you think LA residents can anticipate seeing if this ballot measure gets passed?
The state will take the money that would normally go to the counties. So if the state is a proper steward of the funds, and that's an if they are, then they will allocate that money to the places that need it the most. So we're going to see more beds being made available, more units being built to house people with severe mental illness who are formerly unhoused. What's happening right now in California and why this measure is so looked at, the population of homeless in California is going up. We have close to 200,000 people who are unhoused in our state. Concurrently, the number of available beds for people who have severe mental illness is going down. It's gone down by about a third over the last 10 years. So those two problems concurrently mean we've got to do something. So this bill emerged because the state legislature said, we're going to put it to the voters. They twice passed legislation to say, let's see what the voters say. So now it's in our hands to decide, do we want to take a gamble and say the state will be a better steward of this funds because at least they can direct it in the area we want, or can we not afford to do this right now because we can't trust Gavin Newsom's state?
Well, thank you both so much for joining me tonight. It looks like there are very important decisions to be made, and it's up to California voters to vote on Prop 1. We'll be sure to keep an eye on the updates as the polls remain open, but for now, we'll head back to the studio. Michael, what's going on with the LA County Supervisor race?
And thanks again, another important race here in LA, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. What we're seeing tonight is a contentious local race, which includes a former sheriff and a long-serving incumbent. Three candidates tonight vying for the supervisor's seat. Janice Hahn, the current county supervisor in the seat, seeking re-election in a district that's borders have slightly changed since the last time Hahn sought to win. Alex Villanueva, the former Los Angeles County sheriff, marred in controversy, particularly over his handling of deputy gangs. He lost the race to remain sheriff and is now seeking a spot on the Board of Supervisors. And John Krushenk, a local businessman and former mayor of Rancho Palos Verdes, is also in this competitive race. Early results tonight show Janice Hahn far and away with the lead coming in at 64%. The former sheriff Villanueva, 24%, and the former mayor of Rancho Palos Verdes barely hanging on there at 12%. Janice Hahn, the incumbent in this race, who's currently winning, like we just said, running on a myriad of platforms. Hahn speaking specifically to her platforms on offering mental health services to the unhoused, expanding affordable housing, as well as other issues affecting Angelenos, including a women's right to choose and supporting the first responders here in LA. Former Sheriff Villanueva, who's still miles away from Hahn in this race, spending most of his time on a campaign running against incumbent Janice Hahn. Villanueva continuing to call Hahn out for nepotism and corruption. The former sheriff also unsurprisingly way pro-law enforcement and also telling his voters to vote no on Prop 1. The Board of Supervisors, just one of the boards here in LA that kind of runs the city, but as with that, the LA City Council, Kevin De Leon, still up tonight for re-election in another local race. Quite marred in controversy. I mean, all these races seem to have a little bit of controversy. Villanueva, the former sheriff, controversy. De Leon, controversy. George Gascon, the very progressive district attorney, controversy. What does that tell you guys about the races here in Los Angeles?
I think it's very interesting because usually the incumbent doesn't have that hard of a job getting reelected. But as we see here, Los Angeles is ridden with scandal, and Angelenos are, to put it quite frankly, tired of it. Janice Hahn is also a legacy politician. She has been in her role for almost 10 years now, so we're not surprised that she, is winning right now. But what do you think about that? I mean,
Janice Hahn seems like she is running away with this race, 64%, like we said earlier. I mean, just quite far and away. But, the one I'm more interested in is the district attorney's race. George Gascon, like people have said, very progressive. His own staffers running against him on a tougher on crime agenda. I mean, and I think that's a real concern for a lot of voters here in LA and California. I know students at USC who have been victims of crimes who are scared to walk around the area, and they want to see people and have a district attorney that's prosecuting these crimes. And I think that's a very real concern for a lot of people. Nathan Hochman, right, running on a much more tough on crime. His numbers tonight the closest to Gascon in this race. But, George Gascon seems to kind of selectively apply these laws. Like we brought up with the case of that slain deputy not seeking a death penalty. I don't know, does George Gascon thinks he gets to pick and choose which laws he gets to apply, because the death penalty is the law of the land here in California. Nathan Hochman, you can debate all day long whether you're pro or against death penalty, but people, I think, want a DA that's going to apply these laws.
I mean, very fair points that you bring up. Some critics have even gone so far to call Gascon pro-crime and anti-victim, very strong sentiments against Gascon. So we will see. He did have those 2 failed recalls. We'll see what Californians think about our current DA and if he will get reelected. But stay tuned. After the break, we have reporter Sophie Sullivan taking us to the Los Angeles Ballot Processing Center, where your ballot is potentially being counted as we speak.
Bonjour, je suis le grand musique.
Je suis la jeune fille.
Yes, that's French they're speaking. And no, these children aren't French. They're American. And they've acquired their amazing new language skills from Muzzy, the remarkable new video language program for children developed by the British Broadcasting Corporation. With this unique BBC language course, children learn a second language with incredible ease. 4 delightful videos quickly become their favorite TV show and teaches children the same way they learned English. Learning another language becomes fun. You'll be amazed when your children begin speaking and understanding their new language from the very first day through this unique method. The entire course, 4 videos, 2 audio cassettes, the activity book, and the parent's guide and answer book is available in French, Spanish, Italian, or German.
To order, use your credit card and call this number. We'll ship and charge you $28.08 a month for 6 months. Your satisfaction is guaranteed. Call 1-800-424-0700.
Okay, this stuff is really amazing. I mean, I put it in my mouth and I taste watermelon, but it's not just that. I taste strawberry too, but it's kind of like a watermelon-y strawberry put together. Hey, hang on. Sorry about that. And the bubbles are really awesome. I mean, that's why they call it Max, I guess, obviously. That sort of makes sense once you think about it. Oh, I'm Dan, and that's Chuck. Hubba Bubba Max. A whole new kind of bubble. Hey!
Thanks for staying with us. This just in, the LA District Attorney race, controversial incumbent George Gascon has jumped to an early lead according to City News Service. He has 23.8% with just 18% of the vote counted. Let's check to see if we've made some headway in the race for late Dianne Feinstein's U.S. Senate seat.
Olivia, I know you're standing by with some results for us to look at early on. How is it looking for those Senate candidates here in California?
Yes, Michael. Actually, we heard that Adam Schiff has won part of his race. We don't know if Steve Garvey is going to meet him for that race in the runoff, but Adam Schiff was called by AP, and Garvey is leading for a second spot. He is in the lead by 37%, and Steve Garvey is trailing with 29. We had even said earlier, you know, it's quite miraculous, actually, that a Republican has this much of a lead in a California Senate race, but because Adam Schiff used 60% of his ads towards Steve Garvey, it's not that much of a surprise. He really wanted to narrow the race between the two of these to make it a two-man race to really push out Katie Porter, because if they did get to November, that would most likely be a tough battle for him. We also think that although, you know, Katie Porter and Barbara Lee are icons in the liberal movement, it'll be interesting to see what happens with them if they do end up leaving their Congress post. They cannot go back now that they have ran for Senate. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Will Biden elect somebody to a position in his administration? Will they open up organizations of their own? And then now until the DA district attorney's race, George Gascon again still just with 6%, Jonathan Hatami 8%, Nathan Hochman at 4%, and Jeff Chemerinsky at 2%. Jonathan and Nathan are both former federal prosecutors, so it will be interesting to see how they govern Los Angeles if they become the district attorney.
Well, now we're going to go back to check in with Tess in the studio, who is talking with two of tonight's panelists from the Forum event. They're going to give us a little bit more information about Nikki Haley and Donald Trump.
Liv, I am joined here by two of tonight's panelists. I have Tom Holohan, professor of communications here at USC, and Jessica Yellen, former CNN White House correspondent and founder of News Not Noise. Thank you both for joining me here in the studio and joining us here at the Forum. Something I think that all of us are interested in tonight is, what does Haley's performance in the primary so far say about Trump's strength within his own party?
I think the fact that she's gotten 20 to 30% in a number of states, and even one, Vermont, shows that he has a significant weakness among moderates in his own party. And a number of these people have said in the exit polls that they don't plan to vote for Trump if he's the general election nominee come November. So he has a steep hill to climb. He needs some of those voters if he's going to win.
Yeah, Trump has done very well in rural areas, and he's done very well with men. He's done very well with older voters. He's had trouble in suburban areas and with women, even in the Republican Party. If they do not come back to the Republicans, if you lose 20% of your base, you're almost automatically vulnerable in a general election. And I think that was a very significant finding. What we have is a race where we really have two incumbents. Obviously, Trump hasn't been in power, but he has the name recognition of an incumbent. He has the record of an incumbent. He has the support of his party, which is indicative of an incumbent. But losing 20% of your party, that's a big loss for an incumbent.
How do you think he's going to go about that in these months leading up to November to win over and court those Haley voters?
Well, first of all, he's going to have to try to get Haley to endorse him. He's going to have to try to get Nikki Haley to drop out and throw her support and hit the campaign trail and aggressively back him. You have to consider that Biden is also going to be trying to court those voters. And one of the key considerations is that a lot of these are women, and they are extremely motivated by reproductive rights this cycle. There was not just only an IVF decision in Alabama that's upsetting a lot of voters, but the Supreme Court's going to rule on whether women will have access to mifepristone, the post-abortion pill. That could really upset this demographic and throw support to Biden.
I don't see Trump changing anything about himself. I think he has two switches on and off. I think if he's on, he's out there performing Trump. And so I don't see him making great appeals to try to reach the Haley voters. The question will be, will their disgust for Biden and their anxiety about what's happening at the border and inflation be enough to keep them in the Republican camp? It's very hard for people to vote against the candidate of their party. So committed partisan Republicans will probably hold their nose, even if they don't like Trump and support him. But I don't see Trump's strategy changing.
I'll add quickly that I was out interviewing some Nikki Haley voters who said to me they won't vote for either guy if she doesn't make the general election.
We spoke to some people earlier, some students actually, about those uncommitted votes and kind of those protest votes. What do you have to say about that coming from the Republican Party, maybe these Haley voters, and also from Democratic voters that aren't agreeing with Biden's policies so far?
Well, uncontested vote is a very easy way to sort of show your sense of protest without sitting home, right? And those are people who, in my assessment, care enough to show up and protest. They're going to want to vote in the general, right? Because these aren't the people who are like, I'm bowing out.
Sure.
They're making the effort to go. So, yes, each candidate has to woo those voters, but I do think uncommitted, if you're voting that way, they're going to come home in the end.
And I don't think this primary is at all indicative of what we're going to see in the general election. The races weren't significantly contested, so a lot of people stayed home. I think turnout will prove to be pretty low in both parties. And I think the question is what happens between now and November. It may seem imminent to us, but in politics, that's a lifetime away. And so much can happen between now and November.
I always tell people, you don't have to look at the polls now. Don't even look. After the convention, you can start then.
Do you think that Biden will change some of his policies as he's getting these protest votes this primary election cycle?
I think he's going to change his message, and he's going to work on emphasizing to people what he knows each constituency really wants. I mean, we no longer work in a world where there's one message for the country. The candidates are micro-messaging to different constituencies through their social media feeds, through web ads, through local activists who are driving a message. And so they're just going to fine-tune what works and emphasize those issues, and you could take any issue and explain why the other guy is worse, whichever party you're in.
Well, thank you both so much for your time here in the studio and here at the Annenberg Forum. And we'll go back to the studio.
We have breaking news on the race for the U.S. Senate. Steve Garvey has taken the second place after Adam Schiff. The two candidates, Schiff and Garvey, will go into a runoff in November. But now we go to Sophie Sullivan, who went to the LA Ballot Processing Center earlier today. Let's take a look.
Good evening, USC. This is Sophie Sullivan, Annenberg Media. I'm here reporting from the City of Industry at one of Los Angeles County's largest ballot processing centers in the region. We're in a 144,000 square foot, formerly Fry's Electronics building that has since been converted into a state-of-the-art processing center. There's cybersecurity, canine dogs, and public and open media access so that anybody can come and watch their ballot being counted live. Now, if you cast a ballot in the last month by mail, your ballot may be one of the thousands that are being processed behind me right now. Or if you cast a ballot today, your ballot will come in by the truckload in the next 2.5 hours as the Sheriff's Department brings them in for ballot workers to count. Now, ballot workers just got back from a break. They're going to be at this for another hour and a half before they start counting the ballots that were cast today. Stay tuned for more. For Annenberg Media, I'm Sophie Sullivan.
Well, the results are in. Schiff has won. He's going on to the runoff in November. Let's check back in with Joey. Has the energy started to shift in the room? Has the party kicked off? What can you tell us?
Yeah, absolutely, Liv. It is crazy in here. The music just started. It's a live performance. Aloe Black, a Grammy-nominated artist, is here playing behind me. There's musicians. There's an entire crowd of people. It is all smiles here as Adam Schiff has already secured that long-awaited victory. He was leading throughout the polls this entire election race, but as Steve Garvey came up close, it was tied coming into Super Tuesday. But Adam Schiff came away, took that first victory spot, with Steve Garvey coming up, looking to take that second spot heading into November. Now, what does that mean if Steve Garvey gets that second spot? Well, as Olivia mentioned earlier, there has not been a Republican in a Senate seat since 1988. So Adam Schiff would have a much easier campaign trail heading into November to secure that second spot in the California Senate. But it is absolutely crazy here. The live music is continuing. The crowd is all smiles as Schiff has secured his victory. We'll be back with you once more later in this evening to check back in. But until then, back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Joey. And Sarah, I know you're standing by at Katie Porter's watch party. The night did not go Katie Porter's way. The AP has called it for Adam Schiff and Steve Garvey. What is it like over there now that it's been called?
Yeah, that's right, guys. So we're actually not 100% sure if this room actually even knows that the race has been called, because Katie Porter was actually slated to speak any second now, or any minute now. So we're going to find out in the next few minutes really how this room feels. So far, we have people who are incredibly excited, people who are ready for Katie Porter to move forward. So we'll see what happens next. But in terms of who Steve Garvey is, especially in comparison to Katie Porter, Steve Garvey is obviously the Republican. He's much more of a staunch pro-Israel peace through strength, as well as low government spending candidate. He has been very forceful in his positions on those issues, whereas Katie Porter is a lot more pro-union. She's very in favor of government spending in really all aspects of her platform, including immigration, as well as obviously the economy, and as well as in crime and public safety and in housing. So that's all we've got for right now, but hopefully there will be news soon, and back to you in the studio.
Los Angeles voters are making a big decision when it comes to funding infrastructure, specifically making streets safer for pedestrians and bike riders. Its measure, HLA. The cost, if approved, is $3.1 billion over 10 years and aims to give better access to walkers, bike riders, and motorcycles.
This is a mandate that does not have funding come along with it. So there are a number of other priorities, a number of other programs that will have to compete for the same dollars that will be required to implement the mobility plan.
Last year, 179 pedestrians died in car crashes on city streets. This was a record for Los Angeles. This billboard is a reminder that on Vermont Avenue alone, there have been 46 pedestrian deaths since 2013.
We're talking a lot about money, but these are lives. If a serial killer was on the loose in Los Angeles, killing an Angelino a day, injuring one every 5 hours, there would be a citywide manhunt. But that's happening today with cars, and we somehow just throw up our hands and say we can't afford to fix the problem. It's just not true.
Right now, HLA LA Mobility Plan has 65% yes and 35% no. HLA Opposition Firefighters Union I think it would be interesting if HLA does get passed, especially where we live in at USC. You know, we see people on bikes all the time. We see people on scooters all the time. We're always getting these alerts of people potentially getting hit or all of these accidents. I think it would help, especially here where we are.
Especially with these college kids. I mean, I've seen the way they ride. It's a little dangerous.
I mean, just last week, I saw someone near USC's campus get on a scooter. We're not sure what happened, but I just saw her on the street, laying on the ground, you know, a very aggressive, violent scene. And if we had safer streets, perhaps people would feel more comfortable on bikes and to be walking. And everyone knows LA's traffic is terrible. And if we could walk and ride our bikes, it would be easier to get around.
Absolutely.
And it looks like the early numbers show that most Angelinos also feel that way. But taking it back nationally, let's catch up with Gabby Rudy, our national correspondent, for an update on results across the nation.
Gabby, what updates can you give us?
Well, Michael, Liv, starting with Virginia, former President Donald Trump leading with 63.1%, Haley trailing behind as expected. Biden also won 88.7%. Going next to Texas, where Donald Trump is also projected to win with 77.9%, Haley trailing behind once again. Biden projected to win 85.1%, uncommitted trailing very far behind, 2.1%. Now, in terms of the current delegate count, former President Trump leads with 551, while Haley trails behind with only 52. As a reminder, there are 865 Republican delegates up for grabs tonight, and whichever candidate reaches the 1,215 delegate threshold will clinch the nomination. I'll have more updates on these races to come. Back to you, Michael and Liv.
And folks, don't go anywhere just yet. The youth vote just might be the key to winning an election in November. Reporter Avery Goodman bringing us more after the break. See you soon.
Let me tell you how we amplify our Latina voices. Check out Dímelo. We have it all.
Deportes.
Entertainment. Noticias. ¿Qué tal? Soy Mariela Gómez y bienvenidos a Dímelo Ahora.
Radio and podcasting.
Comida y cultura. Digital social media.
¿A qué equipo le vas tú? LA Galaxy o LAFC? Dímelo is the only Latina-focused media outlet at USC. Dímelo. We have it all.
Dímelo. We have it all.
Want quality name brand carpet for less?
Call Empire and you can get quality carpet at the lowest price guaranteed. And no payments for 1 year.
800-588-2300 Empire.
Today.
I've replaced your shoelaces with fruit by the foot.
So you did. I replaced your fingers with fruit by the foot.
Bravo. I replaced your bones with fruit by the foot.
Indeed you have. I replaced your guitar strings with fruit by the foot.
Seems like a step backwards, but alright. I replaced your DNA with fruit by the foot. That would be end the game, my friend.
Fruit by the foot. Fruit-flavored snack.
Welcome back to Primary Pulse with Annenberg TV News. A study conducted by the Harvard Kennedy School found that young people appear less likely to vote in this election cycle than they did in 2020.
And concerns about the age of likely presidential candidates Joe Biden and Donald Trump just might have a little to do with it. Reporter Avery Goodman has more on the story.
Generation Z is the most ethnically and racially diverse generation in American history. They're also on track to being the most well-educated generation yet. However, fewer of them plan to vote in the 2024 election.
I'm not voting because I think that all of the candidates are old and they don't represent my values, and I don't know enough about politics to make a big decision like that, and I don't have the time to figure it out.
At this point in the 2020 cycle, 57% of young Americans ages 18 to 29 plan to vote, while only 49% plan to vote this November, mainly due to a lack of trust of politicians and feelings of being underrepresented. College students and younger people are also less committed to voting than in the recent past. Many Gen Zers who are planning to vote feel it's still important for their peers to participate.
I think it's important for our voices to be heard, and people fought for our right to vote, specifically women in the 1920s, so I vote for them.
I really would hope so. I think it's really important to vote, and I think that our generation could have a big say in elections, you know. We have to change the tide. It's our time.
Recent studies have shown that specific issues will have a large influence on voter turnout in 2024.
Climate change and abortion, the issues like that, young people who prioritize them are more likely to vote in 2024. And the same actually goes for some conservative issues. People who prioritize those were more likely to vote. Those who prioritized cost of living and jobs were actually less likely to say that they're extremely likely to vote in 2024.
According to her organization, Gen Z ranked inflation and gas prices as one of their top 3 issues, followed by abortion, jobs that pay a living wage, and climate change. 41 million members of Gen Z will be able to vote in this year's election, meaning they can make a pretty big impact if they showed up in large numbers. For Annenberg Media, I'm Avery Goodman.
And the further we go in this campaign season, youth voting looking as it will be integral as we head this election. We're going over to Hannah Abuhaj, who sits by with a few guests who are quite familiar with the cause.
That's right, Michael. Youth voting is integral with these upcoming elections, especially for Democratic candidates. Regardless of where many youth voters stand on issues like foreign policy and climate change, protests on college campuses have become common over the last few months. So tonight I'm joined with Michael Kittleson, a former campaign worker. Thanks for coming in tonight. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
So I have a question for you. You have experience working on political campaigns. So during that time, what have you found or learned was most impactful regarding the youth vote, especially when looking at how to campaign either causes or specific candidates?
Yeah, definitely. Well, the youth vote honestly goes off of what I call value congruence. Basically, in essence, they kind of see themselves in other candidates. The way they perceive strength, empathetic leadership, etc., is really, really imperative to who they're going to vote for. It's the second largest generation in world history, and it represents 20% of the current electorate. Honestly, they have an enormous impact on the election, 65% of whom voted for President Biden in 2020, but only half of the electorate now says they'll vote for, that they'll even show up in November this coming fall. So I think it'll be really, really interesting to see whether or not value congruence becomes a key part, and honestly, if they show up, really.
So looking forward, whether it's in November or looking tonight after what's happened with the primaries, what do you think is most important for youth voters to know, especially if they're interested in becoming more civically engaged but aren't sure how to get started?
That's a really great question. You know, I was speaking with a couple of youth voters today on campus, and they told me they weren't really enthusiastic because they didn't really know where to start. And they honestly kind of felt exhausted ever since 2016. And so I think that the best message that we can give them is to tell them that their vote really does matter, especially coming up in this election. And I think what campaigns can do in order to get them out is to talk about the issues that really hit home for them, stay local, and talk about what really matters to them and their families and their friends.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. And now we're going to toss it back to the studio to see what's going on with some of the other election parties happening around Los Angeles.
And if you're just joining us, let's remind you that Adam Schiff and Steve Garvey are the two winners tonight in California Senate election. They will face off in November to finish out LaFonza Butler's term and take on a full 6-year term. Tonight, though, we have been standing by all night at Katie Porter's watch party. Didn't go her way tonight, but Steven, Sarah, I know you guys are still there. What can you tell us? What's the latest from Long Beach?
That's right, guys. So again, we're still not 100% sure what the crowd actually knows, whether the race is called or not. As of right now, people still seem happy and excited, but we do know Katie Porter is going to begin speaking any moment, so hopefully we'll get some better reaction then. But Steven, if you would like to...
Yeah, the mood is definitely sombered in here quite a bit. It was very chatty earlier, and those noises have calmed down just a bit. But what's really interesting here is the risk Porter actually took in running in this race. Due to California law, Porter cannot rerun for her House seat. So she is right now sitting out of Congress for at least the next few years. So we're awaiting her 12-year-old daughter, who will intro Porter for her speech, and it'll be interesting to see how Porter talks about Adam Schiff as he goes to then take on Steve Garvey come November. Back to you in the studio.
Let's go back to Hollywood for some final updates from the Schiff campaign watch party. A big night tonight for Adam Schiff. Joey, Rory, any final thoughts from the watch party?
As our party here at ATVN is coming to an end, the party here at the Schiff campaign party is just revving up. Behind us we have Aloe Black, who inspired supporters that this is our time to vote and our time to make a difference. So make sure you go out there and vote on November 5th. We're still anxiously awaiting Adam Schiff to come out and hear what he has to say with his way.
That's right, we're at the Avalon Hollywood, an iconic venue here, almost 100 years old. Celebrities have been here, many musicians, performers, but tonight it's a celebration for politician Adam Schiff. What a unique venue. There are 3 bars, the crowd is lively. It's basically like a mosh pit here behind me as Aloe Black continues his performance. The energy is exciting here as Adam Schiff did secure his spot. This was expected, and the atmosphere has always been positive tonight because of that exact factor. But we'll be here all night. The party is just getting going. Aloe Black singing, waiting for Adam Schiff and other speakers to come out. Senators are here. USC students are here. The demographic of people is very wide. People of all ages, old and young. And it's really an exciting time for those in favor of Adam Schiff. As you can hear the crowd behind me cheering. We'll be here watching, and that's all for us for tonight. Until then, back to you in the studio.
That certainly looks like a great party. Big night for Adam Schiff. But now we're going to go back to Tess Patton to wrap up our coverage of tonight's forum event. Tess, how was it tonight?
Thank you, Liv. You know, it was exciting to see our campus community come together here and rally around Super Tuesday. Tonight's forum event featured a panel of diverse political experts and commentators and students from different political organizations and just interested on campus came, and us in the studio, we really enjoyed hearing their takes and getting to watch the results come in together. We're looking forward to doing this again in November, as we'll host another election watch party and hopefully an even greater turnout as we get closer to Election Day. Thank you, and back to you.
Thanks, Tess. Just about an hour and a half ago, the last votes were cast in California at the polling stations. A few races have been called, but Gabby, what can you tell us about these preliminary numbers?
Yes, Liv. Well, here's an update on where we stand. Former President Donald Trump still leading with 582 delegates. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley following with only 62. Now, President Joe Biden is leading with, well, we know he's leading. Olivia, any update on California?
We do have an update on California. We know that the Senate race will be Adam Schiff and Steve Garvey. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of this plays out in November. You know, we haven't had a Republican in the Senate seat since 1988, so it will be interesting to see how Steve Garvey pushes the needle with Adam Schiff, but we can most likely say that we can expect Adam Schiff to win. In terms of City Council, Kevin De Leon is leading with 29%, Miguel Santiago at 22.4%, and Isabel Jurado with 17.6%. The district attorney results are also in. George Gascon with 22.87%, Nathan Hockman at 18.1%, and Jonathan Hatami with 12.5%. And to the supervisor, District 4 early results, John Cruikshank with 13%, Alex Villanueva 26%, and the incumbent Janice Hahn at 61%. And again to the Senate, Adam Schiff won with 37%, and so did Steve Garvey with 29%.
And, you know, guys, we've seen so many different races from all across the country tonight. Anyone sticking out as particularly surprising or particularly underwhelming?
You know, really looking at that California Senate race, I mean, Adam Schiff was projected to win, but he did really push Steve Garvey up and push Katie Porter out. So we will not have a Dem versus a Dem race, which is what he was trying to avoid. So I think it went exactly as Adam Schiff planned.
Yes, I think it went exactly how he wanted it to go. He wanted it to go, but I didn't think that it would go that way. You know, months ago, to be honest, seeing Katie Porter, knowing about Barbara Lee, I really thought that they would have a better chance in this race. But it will be interesting to see how the next few months go, for sure.
And we'll zoom out, take it nationally for a second. Nikki Haley picking up her second win of this primary season, like we said earlier. Coming in from Vermont, her second win after this week in D.C. Gabby, what are your thoughts on Nikki Haley's spot in this presidential race?
I mean, I don't foresee her continuing on for much longer. I feel like with only 2 states being picked up, she obviously doesn't have much of a shot. And so, unfortunately, I don't see her having a path to the nomination at this time.
Yeah, I think back to California, too. I'm personally surprised that Kevin De Leon is leading, although, you know, he is the incumbent, considering what he said in those secret recordings and audio tapes, and seeing the protests outside his house, seeing the protests at City Council. I am very shocked that he has the numbers that he has right now.
And you know what, guys, I wonder, like, if you're Katie Porter's campaign, are you, like, pretty disappointed in this, right? She comes out of Orange County, a very red area, comes out as this Democratic congresswoman who kind of makes a name for herself on a national stage, has clips go viral of her in Congress giving, you know, tough questions to big financial leaders. And then she comes in tonight and kind of just falls flat. I mean, she's, you know, really not even in the race at this point, right? She's so far behind the top two. What are your thoughts if you're in Porter's camp tonight?
I think it's very unfortunate just because of, like you said, she made it into Orange County, you know, a place that is usually Republican. The fact that she hasn't been in Congress for that long and she really made strides questioning CEOs, and especially for people in our generation, they really appreciated that. So to now see that she's out of that seat, she doesn't have the Senate seat, what is she going to do? I'm very interested to see what ends up happening with her and her camp.
Certainly a disappointing night for the Porter campaign. And now it's all eyes on her congressional seat, which we will be continuing to monitor. Likely that that may flip back to a Republican seat, which is something that I'm sure her camp really doesn't want to happen, but that was the risk she took when she decided to run for Senate.
I mean, we talk about seats flipping all the time. I think you did touch on from earlier today. Kristen Sinema from Arizona, not going to seek re-election in the fall. There is a lot of these Democratic seats that might flip back, and I think that's a big concern for Democrats. Katie Porter now, though, we are getting word that she is speaking. We are going to tune in live right there.
Taylor was in her fearless era. My mom was in her before Betsy era.
Can you try to get
When my mom is home, we sit down to eat together every single night. My brothers and I know all too well that no cell phones are allowed at the dinner table. For them, it's the only time she...
And like we said, a very disappointing night for the Porter team, but she is addressing her supporters there. Thank you so much for welcoming us into your homes tonight for this special Super Tuesday coverage. From everyone at Annenberg Media, I'm Michael Mellinger.
And I'm Liv Kelleher. For more coverage, watch and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Annenberg Media. Good night, and thanks for tuning in.